Waking up in a cold, dark, and damp room, head spinning, vision foggy, and my entire body aches, like I just went 10 rounds with the best heavyweight in the world. You can smell the danger in the air in this place. The last thing I remember was sitting at the bar and seeing the most beautiful woman I had ever seen smiling back at me. I must have spoken to her. I had enough drink in me to give me false hope that I might stand a chance. As I raised my hand to my face, the distinct sound of chains scraping over concrete echoed out around me. I was bound to the wall of this place. My eyes couldn't focus on anything in the room, not even the chain that kept me here. It was pitch black. I tried to remember my training and use the other senses of the body to understand my environment. I was getting nothing. Either it was from whatever hit me at the bar or I had been drugged. But my senses couldn't focus on anything. Fear grips me with every answer I find to rationalize my situation. I find 10 more questions. The fog in my head lifts for milliseconds before plunging me back into darkness. Where am I? And how can I get out of here are two of my most pressing questions. Sat here in the dark, I try to reconcile my actions that might have brought me here. It started in Monaco. I went there to buy a property and claim I lived there to reduce my taxes. I had inherited a small fortune and didn't like the idea of the corrupt government taking a massive bite out of it. I met this guy through some of the more unusual friends I had recently made since acquiring wealth. While at a prestigious gentleman's club in London, one of the many legal advisors had introduced me to a man named Gavin. While we talked about investments and emerging markets, he brought up the subject of offshore accounts. I knew it was something people did, but had no idea how to actually set it up. He said he could help, as that's what happened in that club. People helped each other. I took him at his word and allowed him to make a few arrangements for me. A few weeks later, and all my money was secure in a bank listed in the tropical islands. But that did not deter the tax man. He still wanted more from me. That's when Gavin said I needed to get a passport in another country to lower the tax I had to pay. He had dual citizenship via his grandparents, so was registered in Ireland. He said he heard rumors that it was easy to get such things in Monaco, the old money playground. He had heard of a man called Jason over there that could help, although he had never met the man. It was a friend of a friend type thing. I arrived in the city and checked into my hotel, and after a shower and a cup of tea, there was a knock at the door. This Jason had sent an escort for me to relax with. She was very attractive, but I wasn't in the mood for her. And by not in the mood, I mean I was not confident that she didn't have alternative motives, robbing me or stealing something. Or worse, deliberately getting pregnant by a rich man. That had become a fear of mine since I got the money. What if some girl I hooked up with trapped me like that? Any encounter I had with women after that, I made sure I remained in control. I used protection I purchased. Having money brought a lot of attention from attractive girls. All after one thing, and it wasn't me. And I thought dating before was tricky. After sending the girl away, I received a call inviting me to dinner that night to discuss what I needed from Jason and his organization. Upon entering the restaurant, I noticed him sitting with the escort I sent away earlier, and another fair-haired younger man. Jason greeted me in a polite and professional manner, and the waiter pulled out the chair for me to join them. He said I already met the girl to his left, and the younger male to his right slid his hand under the table and onto my leg. I jumped back in the chair, pushing him away, demanding to know what he thinks he is doing. Jason again interrupted, and told the both of them to leave. Without a word said they both did just that. I looked across the table at him, demanding to know what the hell he was playing at. He apologized immediately, saying he assumed as I sent the girl away earlier that I might have different tastes. He was hoping that it would relax me before we actually got down to the business at hand. I informed him that I was here to look at property in the area and not get set up like a drunken tourist out for a good time. I left in anger and headed back to my hotel. The eerie feeling that I was being watched had been with me since I arrived. Now it was intensified. I stopped for a drink at the hotel bar, something to settle my anger. The bar was like many in such places, overpriced shinny, and numerous ladies of the night looking to pick up some work. Two of them had approached me before I gave up and headed to my room. I called Gavin and told him what had happened, and after he finished laughing, he said that he had only heard of this. Jason never dealt with him, and maybe I should just check out a few estate agents around town and look up some reputable legal firms. They might be able to help me. The next day, I ventured out into town to look for such places. I found a few apartments that looked nice and went in to inquire. Once they asked if I lived there and I didn't, it was almost like a straight no. To them, it wasn't about the money like it is back home. You could buy anything if you had enough cash. After the third estate agency turned me away, he did tell me that the only way was via an agent who specializes in such things. He gave me a card with the guy's details. And of course it was Jason. As I sighed and walked away, a car pulled up next to me, and Jason himself stepped out to talk to me. He again apologized for what happened before, and asked if we could start again and talk over a coffee. The fact he drank coffee should have been my first sign he was no good. We went to a little cafe nearby, and he explained that he often gets people like me with no real connection to things in his city asking for help. Most of them just want to know where they can score drugs and hookers, so their wife back home doesn't find out. He assumed I was the same, hence why he sent me a girl, and when I rejected, assumed I was looking for a boy. It seems like the type of people that go to him are a little bit degenerate. He told me he had done lots of property deals for these kinds of people, and knew all the laws that prevented me from doing this on my own. I felt like I was stuck between a rock and hard place. After the chat, he took me to a place that overlooked the harbor. It would be one of those places that the Formula One passes right by when that comes to town. It was for sale at around 12 million euros. He gave me the keys and told me I could stay there for free for the rest of my trip. Get used to the place. As I explored the rooms, I found cards for ladies of the night tucked away in drawers. This guy was more of a pimp than a real estate broker. That eerie feeling was creeping up on me again in this place. I spent a good few hours there checking everything that triggered my senses off. I found hidden cameras in the walls and behind all the mirrors, including the ones on the ceiling of the bedroom. This entire place was recording my every move. I left shortly after and headed ABC towards my hotel. Along the way, I ran into one of the first estate agents from earlier in the day. She had seen me exit the building I was offered the apartment in. Being in the trade, she knew who Jason was, and that he had a reputation for extortion of overseas people. She advised me to seek out a law firm in the town and gave me the details. Of course, I was skeptical, as it seemed everyone here knew Jason and possibly was out to scam me. I checked the company with my own legal guys back home first. He was not happy I went to go and do this on my own, without talking to him first. I'd always assumed I only used legal guys like him if I was in trouble, or needed to draw up a contract or something. It never occurred to me that this one guy I had trusted to sort out all my property back home might have connections out here. He had put me in touch with someone he knew, and ended our call with a statement that we will be having a very long off-the-record chat when I return home. He made it sound like I was going for a sit-down with him, like he was some underworld crime boss. This guy who had represented me in countless criminal cases over the years, and had made some truly great deals when I had gotten the money to keep me from being ripped off. Surely he wasn't connected like that. Before I made it back to the hotel, another car pulled up on me. It was the guy my solicitor sent. We had a cup of tea in the hotel lobby, and he asked me if I found anywhere I liked yet. One place I liked the look of was with the first estate agency, who gave me a card for another company, and not Jason. At the mention of his name, this guy asked me not to mention him again. I have a feeling that Jason has upset a lot of people. We pulled up the website of the estate agent and found the place. It backed onto the harbor and was priced around 6 million euros. We arranged a viewing the next day. Jason kept calling me and sending messages asking if I was happy in the apartment and when we would meet to arrange payment. After my viewing of the other place and checking for cameras, I was happy, and the deal was in play with the friend of my solicitor dealing with it all for me. But I knew I would have to deal with Jason at some point. I had been given the details of his office via someone who will remain nameless, and I went to investigate. He wasn't there at first, but arrived around 11. He made a few calls before leaving. I tailed him to another office building across the city. Using the skills I had learned growing up in London, I managed to gain access to the lower levels and used the fire stairs to get up to where Jason was. I slipped into the office behind him. He had a single desk with an entire video wall set up. There must have been at least 40 monitors each with 4 screens on each. As I looked, they were all inside people's homes. I noticed the one that looked familiar, and that was the one he wanted me to buy. He was recording every one of his clients. It was then he flicked a control on his desk to bring up one home, an older guy with a very young-looking girl. He watched as they got it on, and as he opened the drawer to bring out a box of tissues, I knew what he was going to do next. As he started to bring himself off, I made my presence known with a loud cough and pressed a stapler to the back of his head. He didn't know it was that, and thought it was a gun. As his neck craned upwards, seeing me standing over him, the fear in his eyes and the blood draining from his face as I told him to put his cock away. The screen was more in focus, and what appeared to be an underage girl turned out to be a midget. This guy would sell you a property laced with hidden cameras for you to party in, and then blackmail you with video evidence. I demanded he start talking about what he was up to, but the fear in his expression wasn't so much of me catching him out, but of something else. He didn't seem like the mastermind type, and clearly he was working for someone. But when I asked who it was, he shut down, almost like he was too afraid of what they would do to him more than what I might. The 7 apartment blocks he controlled were all owned by powerful people in the business world. He must have someone real big behind him to be able to blackmail them. I gave him a slap and left him asleep on his desk and left. I had to check out of the hotel in case Jason or his boss came looking for me. I stayed in my new apartment as it was vacant. I could stay there while the paperwork was being done. The next day, as I sat in a waterfront cafe having tea, a man joined me. Never gave his name, just sat down. I knew this routine. I had done it myself many times. This guy must have been Jason's boss. I looked around and noticed the people all around me were working for him. The random people sitting behind me, the two across the street and 2 carloads a bit further up. I signaled towards all of them and asked if they were indeed his. He just smiled and nodded. He was testing me to see what else I noticed before we spoke. It was as I looked around again, I saw that the staff of the cafe were also working for him. In fact, the entire street seemed to be. And when presented with this question, he simply replied, "Very good." He had a strange accent that I hadn't heard before, even though his English was excellent. He asked me if I worked for MI5 or one of the other intelligence agencies. Not knowing how this might go, I simply answered with the classical, "You tell me." I didn't want to say no, and this guy does. And next thing I know, a black van pulls up and I'm never seen again. But asking me that made me feel this guy was working for some government entity. But I couldn't tell what one. Both of us answered questions the other put out, carefully thinking before we answered each time and looking directly at each other. It was like a game of chess in our heads, waiting to see who made a wrong move first. He was upset that I found out what his puppet was doing with the apartments, and it seemed like whatever group he worked for liked hiking the influence over powerful people. I did wonder why I was targeted, but based on the little information he gave in his replies, I assumed it was based on money. I had a lot of it now, and would be invited into select clubs and establishments, so to have me on file to try and control my actions would be beneficial to them. Working out we had both said all we would, I left him with one final note. "As you own this place, you can cover the cost of a cup of tea for me." I gave him a wink as I got up and left the cafe. That eerie feeling of being watched dissipated after I left. It was replaced with anxiety. I was quite sure they wouldn't come after me just for the price of a cup of tea, but I now understood the level of their operation. Having a disposable frontman like Jason made things easy for them. If it goes wrong, blame him as a rogue agent.